Johnny Cash carried a truth to his grave, and now at 92 Willie Nelson is finally ready to tell it. For years their bond seemed unshakable. Two outlaws side by side, rewriting the rules of country music, their voices intertwined like twin echoes of a restless America. Fans saw the brotherhood on stage, the laughter, the harmonies. What they didn't see were the private moments, the quiet confessions, the loyalty through darkness, and the unspoken pain that only Willie truly understood. Now, with his own time winding down, Willie is breaking his silence. He's revealing what really passed between him and Johnny when the cameras were gone, the truths buried beneath decades of music and myth. What did Johnny entrust to him? Why did Willie keep it hidden for so long? And why is he choosing to reveal it now? Long before the world called them legends, Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash were two restless young men chasing songs through the dusty highways of the American South. The 1950s and early 60s were not kind to outsiders. Nashville's music scene was tightly controlled, shaped by radio executives and studio heads who valued clean-cut images and predictable sounds. Both men felt that pressure early on, and both in their own quiet ways resisted it. Johnny Cash broke through first. His haunting voice and stark, rhythmic guitar style carried songs like Folsom Prison Blues and I Walk the Line to national audiences. He was a contradiction from the beginning, a devout believer who flirted with destruction, a family man with demons that trailed him from stage to stage. Willie Nelson, meanwhile, was struggling to fit into a system that didn't quite know what to do with him. He wrote songs that other people made famous, and when he tried to record his own, Nashville producers softened his sound, sanded off the edges that made it real. He was a songwriter with fire in his gut, trapped in a polished machine. Their paths crossed on the touring circuit. In those years, country artists shared buses, stages, and late-night diners, and word traveled fast about who was worth listening to. Willie and Johnny found each other not through calculated industry introductions, but through shared respect. Johnny recognized something rare in Willie's writing, a raw honesty that echoed his own. Willie saw in Johnny a kindred spirit, someone who stood in the spotlight, but refused to let it define him. Their first conversations were brief, but meaningful. Music connected them long before friendship took root. They began appearing on the same bills, often in small towns where crowds packed into makeshift halls, their excitement drowning out the imperfections in the sound systems. Johnny's sets were tight and commanding. Willie's were looser, unpredictable, almost mischievous. Yet audiences responded to both with equal fervor. On stage, they seemed to orbit the same emotional core, men who understood loss, faith, sin, and redemption, not as abstract ideas but as lived experiences. Off stage, the bond deepened. They shared a quiet understanding of what it meant to stand outside the Nashville establishment. Neither man played by the rules, and both paid the price for it. But that shared sense of being outsiders didn't isolate them, it pulled them together. Over coffee in truck stops and backstage dressing rooms, a friendship began to form. It wasn't loud or performative. It was built on trust, on recognizing something in the other that few truly could. This was the beginning of a brotherhood that would last decades. Two men on parallel paths, drawn together not by strategy but by something much deeper, a shared defiance and a shared truth. By the mid-1980s, Willie Nelson and Johnny Cash were no longer the hungry outsiders they had once been. They had each carved their own place in music history, weathered storms, and stood their ground against an industry that had tried to mold them. But rather than settle into their respective legends, they chose to join forces. What emerged was one of the most iconic collaborations in country music history, the Highwaymen. The idea wasn't born in a boardroom. It sparked on the road, where Willie, Johnny, Waylon Jennings, and Chris Christopherson often crossed paths on tours and television specials. They shared a rare bond, Four fiercely individual artists who had spent decades pushing against the Nashville mainstream. In 1984, that shared spirit turned into something tangible. The four men recorded Highwaymen, a song that fused their distinct voices into a single haunting narrative about life, death, and resilience. It became a #1 hit and set the stage for a new chapter. On stage, the chemistry was undeniable. Johnny's deep baritone anchored the performances. Willie's nasal twang added a sly edge. Waylon brought grit, and Chris delivered poetic intensity. Each man kept his individuality, yet together they formed something greater than the sum of their parts. Audiences weren't just witnessing four stars, they were watching a brotherhood unfold in real time. Concerts often felt more like family gatherings than formal shows. They joked with each other, traded lines with ease, and instinctively gave each man his moment to shine. Behind the curtain, their bond ran deeper than music. They shared buses, meals, and conversations that stretched long into the night. Fame no longer separated them. It united them. They understood the weight of what they carried. Decades of touring had given them scars and stories, but it had also made them wise. Among the four, Willie and Johnny often gravitated toward one another. Their personalities balanced each other. Johnny's solemn presence met Willie's mischievous calm. In quiet moments, they spoke as old friends who had lived through parallel storms. The Highwaymen era also gave them a new kind of freedom, no longer beholden to the expectations of their early careers. They performed on their own terms. Their concerts drew massive crowds not because of novelty, but because fans could sense something authentic. They weren't pretending to be a supergroup, they simply were. For Willie and Johnny, these years represented a rare convergence. Two artists who had spent decades walking separate roads, now standing side by side with nothing left to prove. Their camaraderie wasn't for show. It was lived, felt, and witnessed by thousands night after night. This was the period when their friendship crystallized into something unshakable. They weren't just colleagues or fellow travelers anymore. They were brothers, carrying the weight of their legacies together, song after song, mile after mile. As the spotlight followed Johnny Cash through the decades, so did his shadows. Publicly, he was the man in black, a figure of strength, conviction, and artistic power. Privately, he wrestled with demons that nearly cost him everything. Addiction took hold early in his career, and never fully released its grip. His dependency on amphetamines and barbiturates pushed his body to its limits, straining his relationships, his health, and at times his will to keep going. Through those difficult stretches, many in the industry kept their distance. Some couldn't handle the unpredictability that came with Johnny's spiraling. Others, driven by image-conscious record labels, stepped away to protect their careers. Willie Nelson didn't. While never loud or performative about it, Willie was one of the few who stood steady. He didn't try to control Johnny's choices or moralize his struggles. Instead, he offered quiet, unwavering presence, a rare kind of loyalty in a business built on shifting alliances. There were periods when Johnny disappeared from public view, retreating to rural Tennessee or rehabilitation centers to regain his footing. Willie visited, called, and waited. Their friendship wasn't built on constant interaction, it was built on trust. Johnny knew Willie wouldn't exploit his pain, and Willie understood that his friend didn't need lectures. He needed someone who would still be there when the curtain lifted again. When Johnny returned to the stage after his lowest points, Willie didn't hesitate to share it with him. They appeared together on television specials and benefit concerts, often with no fanfare. Willie's approach was subtle but powerful. He stood beside Johnny as if nothing had changed, reminding audiences that the man they admired was still here. For Johnny, who carried guilt and shame about his struggles, that acceptance mattered more than words. The 1970s and 80s were turbulent for Johnny's career. Shifts in the music industry left him feeling sidelined, and some younger artists viewed him as a relic. Willie never adopted that view. He saw the artist, the soul, the friend who had shaped country music's foundation. Even as Johnny's commercial success faltered, Willie's respect never wavered. He kept inviting Johnny to share stages, knowing that his presence carried weight no chart position could measure. That steadfast support forged an unspoken bond between them. Johnny wasn't a man who easily expressed vulnerability, but he recognized who stood by him when the lights dimmed. Willie's loyalty wasn't about grand gestures or public declarations. It was about showing up, consistently, without needing recognition. In a world that often celebrated you when you were up and forgot you when you were down, that kind of friendship was almost unheard of. Johnny faced battles that would have broken many, but through them he had a constant figure in the background. A friend who never turned away. As their fame grew, so did the stories surrounding them. Two men of towering influence, both commanding global stages, were bound to attract speculation. Fans and journalists alike often searched for cracks in their friendship, convinced that two giants couldn't stand side by side without friction. The industry, ever hungry for drama, sometimes encouraged those whispers. Record labels quietly compared album sales, promoters debated who should close a show, and reporters crafted headlines that pitted one icon against the other. Johnny's image was larger than life. His television show, his prison concerts, and his defiant stance as the Man in Black made him a cultural symbol. Willie, on the other hand, became the face of outlaw country, a figure of effortless rebellion who connected with audiences through honesty rather than spectacle. Their approaches couldn't have been more different, and to outsiders, those differences looked like competition waiting to explode. There were moments when scheduling, business decisions, or media spin created the appearance of tension. When both released major albums in the same season, industry insiders treated it like a quiet showdown. When one secured a high-profile television slot, the other's team would field questions about being overshadowed. Yet beneath that noise, their relationship remained grounded. Neither man publicly indulged those narratives. In interviews, they consistently redirected attention back to the music, refusing to fuel any rivalry. Backstage, their interactions were the opposite of combative. At festivals and televised specials, they often shared dressing rooms or lingered after rehearsals. Willie's laid-back demeanor meshed easily with Johnny's intensity, creating a rhythm that reporters rarely captured. While others speculated about competition, the two men were often trading stories or quietly tuning their guitars side by side. Fans, however, sometimes projected their own loyalties onto the pair. Some preferred Johnny's darkness, others resonated with Willie's warmth, and debates filled newspapers and fan clubs about who carried outlaw country. Instead of letting that divide them, Willie and Johnny treated it like background noise. They understood that healthy differences made their bond richer, not weaker. If anything, the perceived rivalry worked in their favor professionally. The mystery surrounding their dynamic kept audiences intrigued. Promoters leaned into it to build anticipation, knowing that putting both names on a poster guaranteed a sold-out venue. Willie and Johnny, aware of this, played along just enough to keep fans curious, but they never allowed it to distort the truth between them. Their relationship thrived precisely because they didn't need to compete. Each man respected the other's lane. Willie admired Johnny's moral conviction and cultural weight. Johnny respected Willie's quiet defiance and artistic freedom. Whatever the world wanted to believe, the men themselves never saw each other as adversaries. What some interpreted as rivalry was, in reality, a partnership built on mutual understanding. In the twilight of his life, Willie Nelson has begun speaking with a kind of openness that only comes with age. His voice, still steady but softened by time, carries memories that stretch across more than 7 decades. When he talks about Johnny Cash now, it isn't with the playful tone he once used on tour. It's reflective, deliberate, and tinged with something he rarely expressed publicly before: regret. For years, Willie kept certain feelings locked away. He had always preferred action to explanation, choosing to show his loyalty through presence rather than words. But in recent interviews and appearances, he started to reveal the weight of that silence. He admitted that there were things he never told Johnny directly, words of admiration, of gratitude, and of brotherhood, that he wishes he'd spoken while they still had time together. It wasn't that their bond lacked closeness, it was that both men, proud and private in their own ways, didn't always voice what they felt. One confession stood out. Willie reflected that Johnny had been a pillar during some of the loneliest stretches of his career. Even though Johnny often appeared to be the one in need of support, there were moments when the reverse was true. Willie acknowledged that simply knowing Johnny was out there walking his own road gave him strength to keep going. He had never said that to Johnny's face. "He probably knew," Willie remarked, "but I should have told him anyway." That quiet admission resonated deeply with fans. For decades their friendship had been painted in broad strokes, two icons standing shoulder to shoulder. Willie's words peeled back the image to reveal something more intimate, a friendship shaped by unspoken understandings and occasional missed opportunities. His confession wasn't a scandal, it was something far more powerful, an honest acknowledgement of emotional restraint between two men who lived in a world that rarely encouraged vulnerability. Willie also shared that he had long admired Johnny's ability to stand firm in his convictions, even when it cost him dearly. Whether performing in prisons, speaking out on social issues, or embracing his faith in a skeptical industry, Johnny never wavered. Willie confessed that he envied that strength. He saw in Johnny a moral clarity that he didn't always feel within himself, and that quiet envy inspired him more than Johnny ever knew. At 92, these reflections carry a different weight. They are not carefully crafted statements for the public. They are personal reckonings, voiced before the final curtain falls. For the first time, Willie is speaking not just as an artist, but as a man looking back on a lifelong friendship with all its beauty, its imperfections, and the things left unsaid. When Willie Nelson speaks about Johnny Cash today, it isn't just as a friend looking back, it's as a man who has outlived nearly everyone from his generation, watching history shape and reshape the legacy of those who came before. Johnny's story has become the subject of books, films, and endless documentaries, each attempting to capture his essence. But for Willie, Johnny's legacy is not a myth to be analyzed. It's something he witnessed up close, something that lives in his memory with extraordinary clarity. Willie often describes Johnny as a figure who stood apart, not because he wanted to be different, but because he couldn't be anything else. In Willie's eyes, Johnny's presence carried weight the moment he entered a room. It wasn't about fame or reputation. It was about conviction. Johnny had a way of making everyone around him pay attention, not through force, but through quiet gravity. Willie saw that countless times, on stages big and small, even in intimate settings. When Johnny spoke or sang, everything else seemed to fall away. Over the years, Willie has made a point of keeping Johnny's songs alive. During his own concerts, he occasionally slips in a tribute, sometimes just a verse or two, without announcing it. It isn't a performance designed for applause, it's an act of remembrance. For Willie, singing Johnny's words is a way of keeping a friend's spirit present in a world that changes faster than anyone can keep up with. He has also shared that Johnny's approach to music influenced his own perspective more than he realized at the time. Johnny believed that songs should tell the truth, even when it made people uncomfortable. He stood firmly behind his messages, whether it was championing prisoners' dignity or confronting personal failings through his lyrics. Willie has admitted that watching Johnny stand unwaveringly behind those choices gave him a model for how to hold on to artistic integrity in an industry that often rewards compromise. When Johnny passed in 2003, the loss hit Willie in a way few could fully grasp. They had walked similar paths for decades, and suddenly, one of those paths ended. In the years that followed, Willie took part in tributes and gatherings honoring Johnny's impact. But his most meaningful tributes have been quieter. He carries Johnny in his mannerisms, in the way he talks about music, and in the reverence he shows for truth in storytelling. For Willie, Johnny's legacy isn't locked in the past. It continues to shape how he moves through the world today. When younger artists approach him, curious about the old days, he doesn't just tell stories, he shares Johnny's values, resilience, honesty, and the courage to be different. That, more than anything else, is how he keeps his friend alive. Looking back now, Willie Nelson carries something few can claim: a complete, unfiltered view of Johnny Cash's journey from a fellow wanderer on the country circuit to one of the most enduring figures in American music. Their lives intersected across decades, through triumphs and failures, quiet moments and history-making stages. But what stays with Willie the most is not the fame or the cultural milestones. It's the truth of their bond, forged not through spectacle, but through shared understanding. As age has slowed him physically, Willie has become more deliberate in how he reflects on those he's lost. Johnny isn't just a chapter in his past, he's woven into the very fabric of Willie's life story. When Willie performs today, there are moments when his eyes drift upward between verses, and those who know him well recognize it. He's not lost, he's remembering. He's revisiting dusty green rooms, long tour nights, and moments where music spoke louder than words ever could. For Willie, the real truth about their relationship is surprisingly simple. They never needed to explain it to anyone, including each other. They came from different worlds, carried different temperaments, and chose different artistic paths. Yet they shared a rare, wordless trust. It wasn't about constant declarations of friendship. It was about knowing that no matter the distance or the silence between them, there was a bond that wouldn't break. He has acknowledged that reaching this stage of life brings both peace and ache. Peace because he can finally articulate the feelings he once kept inside. Ache because he cannot share those words with the man who inspired them. It's a paradox that sits quietly in the background of his reflections. Joy for what was, and sorrow for what can't be said now. In interviews, that duality surfaces in pauses more than in statements. Willie often goes still before answering questions about Johnny, as if summoning a presence that still lingers just beyond the edges of memory. When he speaks now, he emphasizes not the legend, but the person. The friend who laughed at small things, who carried his faith like a compass, who stood up for people who had no voice. These are the truths Willie wants the world to remember, not the carefully curated myths that history sometimes creates, but the human being behind them. Two men, two paths, one enduring truth. Their friendship was built on respect, honesty, and a shared refusal to be anything other than themselves. Willie Nelson has lived long enough to tell that truth in full, and in doing so he ensures that the story of their bond will outlast them both. Willie Nelson's reflections on Johnny Cash aren't just memories from a distant past. They are a living testimony to a friendship that shaped two lives and helped define an entire genre of music. In his 90s, Willie has stripped away the noise, leaving only the essence of what mattered. He isn't interested in rewriting history or adding drama to it. Instead, he's offering something far more powerful: clarity. The truth he carries is both personal and universal. It speaks to loyalty that doesn't need applause, admiration that doesn't demand attention, and a bond that endures long after the curtain falls. Johnny's story has been told many ways over the years, but through Willie's eyes, it gains a new dimension: the quiet strength of a connection forged through time, trust, and shared purpose. As Willie continues his journey, his voice now carries not just his own story, but the echo of a friend who walked beside him. For more emotional stories, check out this video.